In the unforgiving deserts of West Texas, where the Guadalupe Mountains rise like ancient bones from the earth, there's a legend buried deeper than gold, a tale whispered for generations. It's the story of William Sublet and the lost mine that may, or may not, exist beneath sun-scorched stone. The man himself was as much a mystery as the gold he carried. Sublet drifted into West Texas sometime in the late 1800s, with no family, no origin story, and no business in town, except for the heavy sacks of gold ore slung over his shoulder. He wasn't a banker, wasn't a miner, and didn't look like a man with friends in high places. Yet his gold was purer than anything ever pulled from Texan soil. When townsfolk asked where he'd found it, he'd offer only vague answers. Out in the Guadalupe. He'd vanish for weeks, then reappear in dusty saloons or general stores, always with fresh nuggets, always alone. Word got around. Prospectors followed him on horseback, trying to track his trail. Sublet always lost them. Not through speed, but through cunning. He knew the desert like it was etched into his memory. Every bluff, every dry creek bed, every cave that seemed to lead nowhere. He claimed he'd found an old Spanish mine, a forgotten stash abandoned long ago, possibly hidden by missionaries or conquistadors fleeing native resistance. Some even said he'd found part of a map etched into stone, symbols and numbers worn by time but still readable. He once hinted that the entrance was camouflaged, disguised by nature or sealed by hand, so no man could stumble upon it by accident. And then, just like that, he died in 1892. Quietly, with no confession and no map. The secret went with him, but his death wasn't the end, it was the beginning of obsession. Treasure hunters combed the Guadalupe Mountains for decades after. Entire expeditions launched into the wilderness with picks, dynamite, and dreams. None returned with gold. One man claimed to have found a shaft lined with Spanish timbers, but it caved in before he could prove it. Another swore he'd seen old carvings in a remote canyon wall, but when he returned with a guide, the wall had been scorched by wildfire. Everything erased. Then came the stories. The mine was cursed, they said, guarded by spirits, protected by the mountain itself. One prospector claimed he watched his compass spin in circles near a peculiar rock formation shaped like a sleeping dog. Another man said he found a gold nugget in a dry stream bed, only to be bitten by a rattlesnake the same night. Superstition took hold. Yet there's a strange consistency in all the accounts. Almost everyone who got close described similar landmarks: a narrow ravine, a flat mesa, a cavern sealed with stone. Even more curiously, geologists who later surveyed the area confirmed small traces of gold in the region's quartz, but not in concentrations that explained Sublet's haul. So where did he get it? Some believe he simply found an old Spanish stash, hidden centuries ago and never replenished. Others insist there was a natural vein, long since collapsed or buried by landslides. Still others think the entire story was a ruse, that Sublet was laundering gold from somewhere else and used the mine myth to throw people off. But that doesn't explain the purity of the gold, or Sublet's behaviour. He never lived lavishly, he never bought land or claimed fame. He used his gold modestly, paying for supplies, helping a friend in need, occasionally buying a horse. That's not how con men operate. That's how men with something to protect behave. Something bigger than gold. Somewhere in the Guadalupe Mountains, maybe behind a false wall or under a pile of rubble, the truth may still lie untouched. Or maybe the truth is just a ghost now, blown away with the desert wind, along with every other secret the frontier has swallowed. And yet, it lingers. Because something about Sublet's quiet confidence, his precise returns, and that unmistakable gold keeps the legend alive. But while the American West was chasing gold, another mystery was unfolding far across the Atlantic. A ghost ship drifted into the harbour of Dublin, its sails torn, its deck empty, and its crew gone without a trace. The world would come to call it the Uzel Galley, and its story is even harder to explain. The sea has always been a place of wonder and dread, a realm where fortunes are won and lost, and where countless stories of mystery and adventure have taken root. Among these tales, few capture the imagination quite like that of the Uzel Galley, a ship that vanished without a trace, only to return years later, its secrets still locked away beneath the waves. It was the late 17th century, a time of great change and turmoil on the seas surrounding Ireland. Dublin thrived as a bustling port, its docks alive with merchants, sailors, and the endless movement of goods across the Atlantic and beyond. Among the many vessels that called the port home was the Uzel Galley, a merchant ship engaged in trade and transport, typical of the era, but destined to become the subject of one of Ireland's most enduring maritime mysteries. In 1695, the Uzel Galley set sail from Dublin bound for the coasts of Spain and Portugal, its hold filled with valuable cargo. The ship was commanded by Captain Roland Morris, a seasoned seafarer respected by his crew and merchants alike. The journey was expected to be routine, a familiar route travelled countless times by ships in Ireland's trade fleet. Yet, this voyage would become anything but ordinary. Weeks passed with no word from the Uzel Galley. Anxiety grew among merchants awaiting the return of their goods and families, hoping for their loved ones' safe arrival. As months turned into years, hope faded, and the ship was presumed lost to the treacherous Atlantic, swallowed by storms or pirates, a common fate for many vessels of the time. Then, nearly 5 years after her disappearance, the Uzel Galley suddenly reappeared in Dublin harbour. She sailed calmly under her own flag, her sails full and crew intact. The sight shocked the city. The ship's long absence and unexpected return were beyond explanation. The crew's story only deepened the mystery. They claimed to have been captured by pirates off the coast of North Africa, enslaved and eventually escaped after years of hardship. Their tale was harrowing, accounts of captivity, endurance, and desperate flight. But questions arose. How had the ship survived such an ordeal? Why did the ship's logs, which were found on board, contain gaps and inconsistencies? And how could they have navigated such a perilous journey back without aid or detection? The very condition of the ship puzzled experts. For a vessel adrift for 5 years, exposed to the elements and battles with pirates, the Uzel Galley appeared remarkably well preserved. Repairs seemed hastily made, but the hull was intact, the sails mended, and the rigging functional. This resilience deepened speculation. Was the crew telling the whole truth, or had there been mutiny or deception behind the scenes? Some whispered that the ship had been involved in secret trading missions, perhaps transporting goods or information deemed too sensitive for official records. Others suggested darker possibilities, curses, divine intervention, or even supernatural forces protecting or condemning the ship and crew. Historical documents from the time offer glimpses but no answers. The ship's logbooks were incomplete, some pages torn or missing. Official records provide no clear explanation for the gaps in the crew's story. Local newspapers and diaries tell tales of suspicion and rumour, of sailors disappearing after the ship's return or refusing to speak of their experiences. The Uzel Galley became a symbol of the unknown, a floating enigma drifting between fact and folklore. Scholars and enthusiasts have debated its story for centuries, each theory adding layers to the mystery but none fully resolving it. What happened during those lost years? Where did the ship sail, and what secrets did her crew carry home? These questions linger like a fog over Dublin's harbour, reminding us that the sea's depths hold more than water and fish. They hold history's hidden chapters, silent and waiting. As the waves lap against Ireland's rocky shores, the Uzel Galley's story drifts on the breeze, a tale of loss, return, and secrets sealed by time. And far across the world, where the sun blazes over the Australian coast, another mystery waits, a man found without identity, whose silence echoes across decades. The sea, as we've seen, has a way of bringing the unexpected back to shore. But not all mysteries drift in from the water. Some are found on land, placed quietly, almost deliberately, into the everyday fabric of a place. And sometimes the mystery isn't in a ship or an object, but in a man. A single person who shouldn't be there, who leaves behind no name, no voice, and no reason. On the first day of December 1948, in the quiet beachside suburb of Somerton, just outside Adelaide, Australia, a man's body was found lying on the sand. He was propped up against the seawall, his legs extended neatly, his feet crossed, as if he'd simply fallen asleep facing the ocean. But this was no nap. He was dead. No identification was found on him. His pockets had been stripped of labels, and even his clothing bore no tags, all carefully removed. His shoes were unusually polished, his posture strangely composed. There were no signs of trauma, no clear evidence of poisoning, and no one knew who he was. He became known to the world simply as the Somerton Man. The authorities launched an extensive investigation. They checked dental records, fingerprint databases, missing persons lists. Nothing. He wasn't reported missing. No friends or family came forward. Not a single soul seemed to recognize him. What they did find only made things stranger. In a hidden pocket sewn into the man's trousers, a pocket not typically included in that style of clothing, they found a small, tightly rolled scrap of paper. On it were just two words, Tamam Shud, Persian for "it is finished." The phrase had been torn from the final page of a book, a 12th century collection of poetry called the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. With this single clue, a whole new mystery unfolded. Police began a painstaking search for a matching copy of the book, and they found one discarded in the back seat of an unlocked car not far from where the man was discovered. In its final page, the one torn out, they confirmed the missing scrap matched exactly. But inside the book were even more bizarre finds. On one of the back pages was a handwritten code, a string of capital letters arranged in a pattern that resembled a cipher. No one has ever been able to decode it. Despite efforts by cryptographers and intelligence agencies, the sequence remains as unreadable now as it was then. Even more curious was the name and phone number of a local nurse, written faintly in pencil. When questioned, she denied knowing the man, but witnesses said she appeared visibly shaken when shown his bust, a plaster reconstruction made to preserve his face after burial. She insisted she had no connection, though some believed she was hiding something. Theories poured in. Some believed he was a Cold War spy, executed and left behind as a message. Australia at the time was a hotbed of covert intelligence activity, and Adelaide was home to military research sites. Could he have been involved in espionage? Others claimed he may have been poisoned with a rare toxin that left no trace, perhaps digitalis or strephanthine, both difficult to detect with 1940s technology. Autopsy reports showed an enlarged spleen, liver congestion and brain hemorrhaging. Signs that could suggest poisoning, but nothing conclusive. Then there were those who believed the Somerton Man was a heartbroken lover, his death an elaborate suicide disguised by layers of cryptic poetry and anonymity. Or perhaps he was someone who never wanted to be found, someone who erased his own identity before his final moments. More than 7 decades have passed, yet the mystery remains unsolved. Over the years, the Somerton Man's story has captivated amateur sleuths, cryptanalysts, journalists and scientists alike. His body was exhumed in 2021 for DNA testing, and while genealogical links have been proposed, no definitive identity has been publicly confirmed. Even with the tools of modern science, the man's life remains a blank page, one filled with tantalizing hints but no answers. He remains a question that refuses to be answered, and it's not just the mystery of his death that haunts us, it's the idea of how someone could vanish so completely in the middle of modern society, in broad daylight, on a public beach, dressed neatly, dead silently. Like the ghostly return of the Uzel Galley, the Somerton Man reminds us that some stories don't end when we expect them to. They linger, they echo, and they lead us to others. Because just as the Somerton Man was discovered by chance, perfectly preserved in plain sight, so too was a very different figure found thousands of miles away. Not on a beach, but in the mountains. Not in the 20th century, but perhaps long before civilization as we know it. A body impossibly small, unbelievably old and equally puzzling. In the case of the Somerton Man, everything felt modern. Crisp suits, hidden codes, chemical analysis and Cold War paranoia. But the world is full of preserved bodies that speak no language and leave no records. Not all of them wear ties or sit by ocean waves. Some are found curled into ancient stones, hidden in high mountain caves, gazing out at us through the veil of deep time. In the 1930s, high up in Wyoming's San Pedro mountains, 2 prospectors were blasting through thick rock in search of gold when they stumbled upon something no pickaxe or shovel could have prepared them for. In the rubble of a sandstone cave nestled inside what appeared to be a natural hollow sat a tiny, perfectly preserved body. It was no taller than 6.5 inches in a sitting position. Mummified, with leathery brown skin and a flattened skull, the figure appeared human, yet impossibly small. Its arms were folded, its features eerily complete, with sharp teeth visible in a rigid grin. At first glance, it seemed like something out of myth or legend. A fairy, a forest spirit, or a shrunken being from folklore. News of the discovery spread quickly. Scientists, spiritualists, and showmen all took interest in the mummy. Some claimed it was an infant. Others insisted it was not a child at all, but a fully grown adult, part of a lost race of miniature humans that once roamed North America. Nicknamed Pedro, the mummy sparked fascination and controversy. Locals pointed to Native American legends about the little people, small humanoid beings said to live in the mountains, sometimes helpful, sometimes hostile, but always mysterious. The legends were old, passed down through tribes like the Shoshone, Crow, and Sioux, and they often describe beings eerily similar to the mummy found in San Pedro. Was this a story brought to life? A myth turned physical? Pedro's body was first examined by doctors and x-rayed by researchers. One report concluded the mummy was a fully developed adult, possibly 65 years old, with a spine curved from age or congenital deformity. The teeth were sharp, the bones fully formed. The fontanelle, the soft spot in an infant's skull, was closed. This wasn't a baby. This, it seemed, was a grown person, no taller than a foot. But the mystery only deepened. Later studies, including more modern ones, suggested that Pedro may have been an anencephalic infant, a child born with a severe birth defect. This condition causes a smaller head and sometimes gives the illusion of an adult appearance in a very small body. The flattened skull and visible teeth could align with that diagnosis. Yet not everyone agreed. The early X-rays didn't line up perfectly with infant bone structure. And the context, a sealed cave high in the mountains, the ceremonial pose, the deliberate wrapping, didn't feel like an accidental burial or random discovery. To this day, we don't know who Pedro was. Or what. The original mummy has since disappeared. After years of being passed between private collectors, it vanished sometime in the 1950s or 60s, reportedly lost, hidden, or even stolen. What remains are the photos, the X-rays, and the accounts of those who saw it with their own eyes. Copies and replicas exist in museums, but the actual remains are gone. Which, of course, only feeds the legend further. Was Pedro a genuine biological anomaly, an unfortunate child preserved by chance? Or was he something older, stranger, and more significant? Was the body evidence of an undiscovered chapter in human evolution, or a clever hoax created to spark sensation in a time of sideshows and dime museums? Science leans toward a medical explanation, but belief and wonder often live in the spaces where science hesitates. We're drawn to these preserved puzzles because they sit at the edge of the explainable. They ask us not just what happened, but what else could be out there. If a body like Pedro's could be found in the mountains of Wyoming, how many others lie waiting beneath stone and soil? How many truths are mistaken for folklore simply because they don't fit our models? The San Pedro Mountains mummy is part curiosity, part cautionary tale. It reminds us how quickly evidence can vanish, how interpretations can shift over time, and how history often refuses to stay neatly written. Pedro may never speak, his bones may never return, but the ripple he left behind in science, folklore, and imagination continues to grow. And while some mysteries are found buried in caves, others are carved into the very landscape itself, messages from the ancient world, written not on paper or in song, but in stone. Silent carvings that seem to say, We were here, and we knew something you don't. Some mysteries are buried deep, like a tiny mummified body tucked inside a mountain cave. Others are not buried at all. They're left in the open, in plain sight, not hidden, but hard to understand. Not something you find, but something you notice, if you're paying attention. Across the wind-beaten moors and rolling hills of prehistoric Scotland, carved into stone that has stood for millennia, lie strange and silent messages, symbols that stretch back beyond written history. They are called the Concho stone markings, named after their most famous site near the Concho River, though similar markings exist throughout Scotland and parts of northern Britain. These carvings are abstract and mysterious. Spirals, concentric rings, branching lines, cup-shaped depressions, and dots arranged in deliberate but unreadable patterns. They are not random scratches or idle decorations. They were placed by human hands. But why? And for whom? Dating back more than 4,000 years, these marks appear on boulders, stone platforms, and bedrock. Some lie exposed to the sky, others are hidden beneath turf and moss, discovered only by accident. In many places, they're gathered in clusters, suggesting that these stones were once part of a larger ritual or cultural landscape, a message system without words. The term archaeologists often use is cup and ring marks, but that label doesn't explain much. It's like naming the sound of thunder and claiming you've understood the storm. No one knows exactly what the carvings meant, and maybe that's the point. Some researchers believe they were early attempts at mapping the stars, celestial charts etched into stone to track solstices, eclipses, and planetary movements. Others suggest they marked boundaries, tribal lands, or sacred places. Still others think they were part of initiation rituals or shamanic traditions, symbols meant to unlock altered states of awareness. The spirals, in particular, are striking. Spirals occur again and again across cultures and continents, from Irish megaliths to Pacific tattoos to Native American pottery. Is it coincidence, or a shared human instinct to see the spiral, the cycle, as a symbol of time, life, or the cosmos? What's most haunting about the Concho stone markings is their silence. There is no Rosetta Stone to decode them, no accompanying script, no oral history that survived alongside them. We don't even know what language the carvers spoke, if they had a language at all. All we have are the symbols, and they say only what we see in them. Some archaeologists argue that these markings were layered, that over generations different communities added to the same rock panels, turning them into evolving messages, palimpsests of meaning. Others think the symbols were less about literal communication and more about experience, perhaps marking a vision, a dream, a trance. There's even a theory that some of the symbols were meant to be touched, not seen, that the tactile experience of tracing your fingers along the grooves under moonlight or firelight was part of the meaning. And yet, even in this uncertainty, there's something deeply human about these ancient carvings. They tell us, we were here, we thought, we felt. They are whispers from people who lived and died long before the rise of cities or nations, people who understood the land not as territory, but as something sacred, something that speaks. Today, you can still visit some of these stones. You can walk the trails through Scotland's remote hills and stumble upon a boulder etched with concentric rings, as sharp as they were thousands of years ago. But you'll get no answers, only presence, only mystery, and perhaps that's the lesson. We like to believe that with enough science and time, everything will be explained. But what if some things weren't meant to be solved, only witnessed? The Concho stone markings remind us that meaning doesn't always come with a translation, that humans have always created symbols, not always to be understood, but sometimes just to mark that something mattered. And the further we walk back through time, the more we find such objects, Strange shapes, intentional constructions, not tools, not weapons, but puzzles. Like those 12-sided objects uncovered across ancient Roman lands, scattered and unexplained, as if dropped there by mistake, or maybe for a reason. Across the vast lands once ruled by the Roman Empire, from the foggy fields of Britain to the sun-drenched valleys of Hungary, archaeologists have unearthed objects that seem to defy their surroundings. Not coins, not tools, not weapons, but geometric curiosities. They're small, hollow, bronze, carefully crafted, shaped like 12-sided dice. They are called Roman dodecahedrons, and they are one of ancient history's most enduring puzzles. Each one is a 12-faced hollow object, a dodecahedron, with a circular hole in the center of each pentagonal face. No two are exactly alike. Some are the size of a golf ball, others the size of a fist. Many have tiny knobs or pegs on each corner. Some are perfectly symmetrical, others slightly irregular. All of them look intentional, as if made for a purpose. And yet, we have no idea what that purpose was. These objects have been found at Roman military camps, in burial sites, among coins, near temples, even in remote rural settings. Over 100 have been discovered, and not a single written reference has ever been found describing them. Not one drawing, not one inventory list, not even a passing mention by Roman authors. It's as if they were completely forgotten, or purposefully kept secret. So what were they? Theories range from the practical to the mystical. Some believe they were surveying tools, devices used to measure distance or calculate angles, maybe in architecture or land division. Others suggest they were used for knitting gloves. Yarn could be pulled through different holes to size fingers. It sounds strange, but a few reconstructions even show that it works. Still others argue they were part of a game, like ancient Roman fidget toys or game pieces. Some think they had religious or ceremonial use, perhaps linked to astrology. Their design, after all, mirrors the dodecahedron's significance in Platonic thought, a shape representing the cosmos. And then, of course, there are those who believe the dodecahedrons weren't Roman at all, that they were remnants of an older knowledge system, absorbed by the empire but never fully understood. Were they tools, symbols or instructions, lost blueprints we no longer know how to read? The most mysterious thing about them might be how many they are, and how different they are. If they were used widely for a specific task, you'd expect standardization, but there's none. The holes vary in size, the knobs vary in number. Some have decorative patterns, others are plain. It's as if everyone was custom-made, as if each dodecahedron was designed for a very specific person, or ritual, or idea. Consider the level of craftsmanship. Bronze was not cheap. Creating a hollow, symmetrical shape with different hole sizes requires skill. Someone went through a lot of trouble to make each one. These weren't scrap metal or children's toys. They were intentional, and that intention is what makes them so captivating. Some dodecahedrons have been found alongside coins and everyday items, others in graves, some in places associated with mystery cults. A few were recovered from fields where no significant Roman activity had been recorded. It's this randomness, paired with the object's precise design, that creates tension in the story. It's almost like they were left behind on purpose, as if someone wanted them to be found, but not understood. And maybe that's why they still haunt us. We love puzzles, but we also hate not knowing. We look at the Roman dodecahedrons and feel the urge to assign meaning, to make them fit into something we already understand: science, math, craftsmanship, mythology. But maybe the real meaning is something we've forgotten how to even imagine. Artifacts like these remind us that not all knowledge survives, that entire systems of belief, use, and symbolism can vanish without a trace. That sometimes what's left behind isn't a clue, but a question, and sometimes even the question is incomplete. The Roman dodecahedrons sit in museum cases across Europe now, under glass, under lights, labelled neatly, function unknown. People walk past them, some pause, some keep going, but for those who linger, there's always that quiet curiosity, that feeling that you're looking at something important, something deliberate, and yet totally beyond explanation. That's the magic of it. It's not just what it is, it's what it makes us feel, like the spirals on the Concho stones, or the mummified figure curled up in a mountain cave, or the man with no name lying quietly on an Australian beach. These artifacts stir something inside us, a hunger to understand what we weren't meant to know, or maybe something we once knew and forgot. And across the sea, far from Roman roads and British moors, deep within the ruins of an ancient palace on the island of Crete, there lies another object, round, fired from clay, stamped with symbols no one can read. In 1908, inside the crumbling ruins of an ancient palace on the island of Crete, an Italian archaeologist named Luigi Pernier made a strange discovery. It was buried beneath the layers of rubble in a small underground room, one that had clearly seen fire. Amid broken pottery and ash, Pernier uncovered a small, round object, no bigger than a compact disc. It was made of clay, reddish-brown, perfectly circular, and inscribed with symbols unlike anything ever seen before. This was the Phaistos disc, and it remains one of the most mysterious objects ever found in archaeology. It's not just the age of the disc that makes it fascinating, it's the way it was made. The symbols on both sides of the disc weren't carved by hand, they were stamped. That means someone had individual stamps for each unique symbol, like a set of movable type thousands of years before Gutenberg. Let that sink in. The disc dates back to roughly 1700 BCE, during the height of the Minoan civilization, a time when most cultures were still carving words into stone. Yet here was someone using printing technology, not for a book, not for mass communication, but for a single, circular artifact. It's as if someone invented a printing press and used it exactly once. The disc has 241 symbols arranged in a spiral pattern from the edge to the center, on both sides. These symbols include human figures, tools, animals, plants, and abstract shapes. In total, there are 45 unique characters, repeated in sequences that suggest words, phrases, maybe even sentences. But the language is unknown. The symbols appear nowhere else. Not in any known script, not in any recorded language, not even in neighbouring civilizations. In over a century, no one has been able to decipher it. Some have tried to compare it to Linear A, another undeciphered Minoan script, but the two systems share no recognisable characters. Others think it's a syllabary, like Linear B, which was eventually decoded, but again, no matches. A few researchers propose that it might be a form of proto-writing, not language at all, but symbolic expression. Something closer to a ritual chant, a religious liturgy, or even a game board. The problem isn't just the symbols, it's the context. The disc is one of a kind. It was found alone. No similar objects have ever been discovered. No additional stamps, no molds, no fragments of another disc. It's like finding one printed page in a library where all the books have vanished. That singularity is what makes it so difficult to decode. With no other examples to compare it to, it's impossible to test theories. Every interpretation is just a guess. Some say it's a hymn. Others say it's a calendar. One linguist suggested it might be a prayer to a Minoan goddess. Another speculated that it's a board game, with players moving pieces along the spiral track. A more radical theory claims it was a cryptographic message, a kind of ancient cipher intended to conceal knowledge from outsiders. Then there's the wild stuff. Some think the Phaistos disc is a relic of a lost civilization, not Minoan at all, but something older. A culture that predated written history and left behind almost nothing. A few fringe theorists go even further, suggesting that the disc may be evidence of alien contact, time travel, or parallel timelines. It's easy to see how the disc feels out of place. Too modern, too calculated, too quiet. But maybe what unsettles us most is how self-contained it is. There's no preamble, no explanation, no obvious errors. Whoever made the Phaistos disc knew exactly what they were doing. They had tools, they had a system, they had a message, and then nothing. No continuation, no copies, no evolution of the script. It appears, says its piece, and vanishes from the archaeological record. It's like a whisper in time, and it makes you wonder, was the disc meant for someone specific? Was it a token, a warning, a key, or was it never meant to be read by anyone else? Some believe it may have been used in rituals, passed hand to hand like a sacred object. Others think it was buried deliberately to hide it from enemies or to entomb it with its secrets. The fact that it was found in a burned room only deepens the mystery. Was it destroyed intentionally, or was it saved by accident? Over the years, there's been speculation that the disc might be a forgery, that Pernier or someone else faked it. But repeated studies have shown that the materials and techniques used are consistent with other artifacts from the period. It's old, it's real, and it still refuses to give up its secrets. But Crete isn't the only place where strange symbols turn up in unexpected ways. Far across the world, in the forests of Colombia, stone tablets tell of a place no one can find, a city of gold hidden in the jungle, shrouded by myth and pursued by explorers who never returned. The Phaistos disc whispered from a world that vanished before time had learned to record it, a voice from the past made of fired clay and swirled symbols, asking questions no one can answer. But sometimes mysteries aren't buried in ancient ruins. Sometimes they walk into our lives, flesh and blood, only to dissolve again, leaving behind a riddle just as impenetrable. That's exactly what happened one chilly afternoon in 1828, when a teenage boy stumbled into the streets of Nuremberg, Germany. His name? Caspar Hauser, or so he claimed. But the truth was, no one knew who he was, not even Caspar himself. He appeared out of nowhere, dressed in coarse peasant clothing, barely able to walk. He carried with him a letter addressed to the captain of the 4th Squadron of the 6th Cavalry Regiment. The letter claimed Caspar had been given into the anonymous writer's care as a baby, and had never left the house. It also stated that the boy wanted to become a cavalryman like his father, though he didn't know what a cavalryman was. Authorities were baffled. Caspar spoke in broken, almost babyish German, and he seemed completely unfamiliar with basic things, like candlelight, horses, or mirrors. He couldn't even eat solid food at first, only bread and water. His behaviour was off, curious, as if he had been raised in total isolation, as if the world he was born into had been reduced to 4 walls and silence. Doctors and philosophers swarmed around him. Was he a noble child hidden away to protect some dynastic secret? A fraud? A social experiment? Or something else entirely? What made the mystery throb with eerie life was Caspar's account of his early years. Once he learned to speak more fluently, he claimed he had spent his entire childhood in a tiny dark cell, roughly 6 feet long, with straw bedding and a single wooden horse for company. Food would appear while he slept. He never saw the face of his keeper, just a shadowy figure who taught him to write his name by guiding his hand. Why would anyone do this to a child? The theories were endless. Some believed he was a prince, possibly from the House of Baden, hidden away to prevent a scandal, or perhaps swapped at birth to manipulate succession. Supporters pointed to Caspar's refined features, his sensitivity, and his strangely formal bearing as clues of aristocratic heritage. Others weren't so convinced. They noted his erratic behaviour, frequent mood swings, and apparent fondness for attention. As time passed, Caspar found himself shuffled from one guardian to another, always surrounded by curiosity, always watched closely but never truly understood. Then, things got darker. In October 1829, Caspar was found in the cellar of his caretaker's home with a gash on his forehead. He claimed a hooded man had attacked him with a knife, saying, "You still have to die before you leave Nuremberg." But the investigation revealed no trace of an intruder. Was Caspar telling the truth, or was this another act in a deepening performance? The most chilling twist came on December 14th, 1833. Caspar staggered home with a deep stab wound in his chest. He said he had been lured to Ansbach Court Garden by a man offering secret information about his origins. Caspar died 3 days later. The note allegedly found in his coat pocket was cryptic and filled with misspellings. Hauser will be able to tell you quite precisely how I look and from where I am. To save Hauser the effort, I want to tell you myself from where I come. I come from the Bavarian border, on the river. I will even tell you my name, MLO. To this day, no one knows what MLO means. Theories about who killed Caspar, or whether he stabbed himself, remain inconclusive. Forensic tests in the 1990s tried to match his blood to the royal family of Baden, but results were frustratingly vague. The enigma lives on. Caspar Hauser's grave in Ansbach bears the haunting inscription, "Here lies Caspar Hauser, riddle of his time, his birth unknown, his death mysterious." And perhaps that's the most haunting part of all. He may have been a real person, not a legend or myth. And yet, he moved through history like a ghost, as ungraspable as smoke. But what if Caspar wasn't an isolated case? What if history is filled with people, or beings who appear suddenly, like glitches in the world's timeline? Unfamiliar languages, unknown origins, claims of royalty, strange knowledge, or lack of it. Every so often the fabric of reality ripples and someone or something slips through. And that brings us to another strange light in the fog of history, one that flickers across the cold waters of the Atlantic, far from the cobbled streets of Nuremberg. A light that's been reported for nearly 300 years. Some call it a ghost ship, others say it's a curse. But locals in Rhode Island know it by a simpler name, the Palatine Light. They say some souls never find peace, not because they were monsters, but because the world failed them. Like Caspar Hauser, whose brief life left behind a wake of unanswered questions, there are stories of lost travellers whose journeys ended not in mystery but in fire, ice, and whispered sightings long after their death. And across the cold waters near Block Island, Rhode Island, another ghost refuses to be forgotten. Locals call it the Palatine Light. For nearly 3 centuries, residents and sailors have sworn by it. A flickering, burning glow rising from the sea, seen in the dead of night, especially around Christmas. It dances just off the coast, vanishing and reappearing like a ship struggling against invisible waves. Some say they hear screams, others insist it's just the wind, or maybe the waves playing tricks. But a few believe the light is a memory, reliving a terrible end. The legend traces back to 1738, to a ship called the Princess Augusta, though over the years it's been misremembered and mythologized as the Palatine. She set sail from Rotterdam, bound for the American colonies, packed with more than 100 German immigrants seeking a new life. But that dream never reached the shore. It was winter. The Atlantic was cruel, and the voyage long. Disease swept through the ship. Food ran low. The crew, some say, grew desperate or worse, mutinous. When the ship reached the New England coast, she was barely afloat, reportedly leaking and crippled. Then came a storm. According to accounts from Block Island residents, the Princess Augusta was driven ashore by gales and icy surf. Islanders helped survivors onto land. Some say all were welcomed. Others whisper that not everyone made it off the ship, and not everyone wanted to help. The most chilling part of the legend centers on one woman. As the story goes, in the confusion of the rescue, she was either left behind or purposely trapped on board. The ship, already battered, was set adrift again, some say to avoid quarantining diseased passengers. Others believe it was looted and burned by opportunists. Regardless, one detail remains constant: the image of a screaming woman locked below deck, her cries vanishing into the wind as the flaming wreck drifted into the night. And ever since, the Palatine Light returns. Poet John Greenleaf Whittier even immortalized the tale in his 1867 poem The Palatine, fueling its national legend. But what's truth, and what's folklore? Official records show the Princess Augusta did exist, and did wreck near Block Island in 1738. Multiple contemporary newspapers confirmed the event. Survivors were real, and they spoke of hardship, hunger, thirst and illness on board. But the stories diverge wildly from there. Some accounts accuse the islanders of cruelty, even murder. Others defend them as saviours who did what they could in a desperate situation. But neither side can fully explain the sightings that followed. For centuries after the wreck, islanders, fishermen, farmers, visitors have claimed to see the Palatine light. Descriptions match: a bright, flaming glow, about the size of a small ship, hovering just above the waterline. It flickers, sometimes approaches the shore, then disappears. There are no records of a real ship burning in those waters in the years since. No explanations. No debris. Skeptics suggest the light is a natural phenomenon. Perhaps it's phosphorescence, or marsh gas igniting from undersea decaying material. Some even claim it's an illusion caused by atmospheric reflections, what scientists call a fata morgana. But those who've seen it speak with conviction. Too specific, too eerie, too real. And here's the strange thing: its appearance isn't random. The light is most often spotted around Christmas, matching the timeline of the 1738 wreck. It doesn't just flicker like distant lightning or shimmer like moonlight on waves. Witnesses describe movement, purpose, even intent. Sometimes it vanishes when approached. Sometimes it follows boats. It never lingers long, but its presence leaves people shaken, haunted by the silence after it fades. Many folklorists believe the Palatine light endures because the story is unresolved. Was the woman real? Was she abandoned or imprisoned? Did she die in agony, crying for help as the ship burned? Or was her tale just a dramatic flourish, added later to spice up an otherwise tragic but explainable shipwreck? We may never know, and maybe that's the point. What's strange is how similar stories echo across the world. Tales of ghost ships and wandering lights, fire on the sea with no source. From the Flying Dutchman to the Lady Lovibond, these visions share themes: lost voyages, betrayal, restless spirits. But the Palatine light feels different, closer, less legendary, and more persistent. Could it be more than a haunting? Could it be a warning? The sea had long been behind us. Its haunted lights, its phantom ships, the chill that hung in the night air like a warning. But sometimes mystery doesn't float on waves. Sometimes it slumbers beneath sands, buried in silence so complete that history forgets it ever breathed. In the vast desert of Egypt lies Lake Fayum, a shimmering oasis in the middle of nowhere. Today, it's a quiet, arid depression, visited by migratory birds and windswept tourists. But thousands of years ago, long before the pyramids pierced the sky, before even Narmer united Upper and Lower Egypt, this lake was the heart of something ancient, something lost. The story of the Lake Fayum nomads begins in the deep recesses of pre-dynastic time, stretching back more than 7,000 years, to when the Nile's floodplain was still shaping the very concept of civilization. Around this lake, archaeologists discovered signs of complex hunting communities, ancient campsites, and tools: flint knives, grinding stones, even early attempts at farming. These weren't just temporary dwellers. They were people with rhythm, with cycles, perhaps even with beliefs. But curiously, they vanished, not evolved into cities, not conquered by rivals, simply gone. Most unsettling is what they left behind, or didn't. Unlike the ornate tombs of later pharaohs, there are no grand monuments, no mummified rulers, no hieroglyphic chronicles. Their homes were temporary, their graves were shallow, their stories were spoken, perhaps sung, but never carved in stone. Some archaeologists suggest they were among Egypt's first settlers, living when the Sahara was still green. Yet even in their silence, they left strange echoes. One of those echoes is a stone carving found near the lake's edge, a spiral-like pattern with no clear purpose. It predates writing. Some think it represents the lake's seasonal floods. Others whisper it's a celestial map, a way to track stars. A few fringe researchers suggest it may even represent migration routes across Africa, implying these nomads came from much farther away than Egypt. Then there's the matter of their disappearance. The evidence shows that around 5000 BCE, these people simply stopped showing up in the archaeological record. No signs of war, no plagues, just absence. What could erase a people so thoroughly? One theory is climate collapse, that the drying of the Sahara forced them to move or die. But where did they go? There's no direct link between the Fayum nomads and the Nile Valley farmers who came later. It's as if their cultural thread was cut, not woven into Egypt's rise. Even more chilling are the skeletal remains found in shallow graves, some exhibiting unusual features, not typical of other early Egyptians. Their skulls are elongated, their jaw structure subtly different. Genetic testing is limited due to degradation, but some believe these people may have been genetically distinct, possibly a separate migratory group altogether. A few theories border on the fringe. Some link them to the lost civilization of Atlantis, others to ancient Saharan star watchers who vanished beneath desert sands. A controversial fringe paper even once claimed their spiral carving matched symbols found in the Americas, though no peer-reviewed study supports such a leap. Still, the strangeness lingers. Why would a people with tools, rituals, and possibly farming skills simply fade away? Why does no culture claim them, no language descend from theirs? And what of the tales whispered by desert tribes long before modern Egyptology? Stories of silent travellers who came from the lake's edge, who walked at dusk, who spoke a language even their ancestors didn't understand. These oral traditions were dismissed for centuries, but perhaps in their myth lies a fossilized memory. Today, Lake Fayum is quiet. You can stand on its edge and watch the wind ripple the water. You can feel the heat of the sun on the backs of forgotten hills. And if you wait long enough, if you listen closely, you may imagine the crackle of old fires, the thrum of drums, the laughter of a people long gone. But their silence is louder than ever. From the windswept stone of the Scottish Highlands to the sun-scorched sands of pre-dynastic Egypt, these mysteries echo a single truth. The earth forgets only what we let it. And sometimes the stories we don't tell, the voices we bury, the signs we overlook, hide the most profound truths of all. We chase answers in tombs and shipwrecks, in ancient codes and unmarked graves. But maybe the real mystery isn't in what we find, it's in why we keep finding nothing. Over and over in the heart of Bavaria, hidden among the alpine mists and deep forests, rises a castle that seems pulled straight from the pages of a dream. Neuschwanstein, a palace of spires and clouds, commissioned by a man who would one day be known as der Märchenkönig, the fairy tale king. His name was Ludwig II. But behind the beauty of his castles and the magic of his imagination was a darker story, one of obsession, isolation, madness, and, ultimately, murder. Ludwig's reign began in 1864, at just 18 years old. He wasn't a politician. He hated court life. He avoided state affairs. What Ludwig loved was art, music, fantasy. He worshipped Richard Wagner, the composer of sweeping operas and tales of Norse gods. Ludwig gave him endless funds and even built extravagant theatres just for Wagner's works. Bavaria was supposed to be a kingdom, not a stage, but Ludwig blurred the line. He poured state money into building dreamlike castles, Neuschwanstein being the crown jewel. Chandeliers shaped like crowns, walls painted with medieval legends, hidden doors, fake grottos. It was as if Ludwig was building a world where only he could live. And in time, he mostly did. He became a recluse, living alone in his fantasy palaces, sleeping during the day and riding through the forests by moonlight. To his ministers, Ludwig wasn't a dreamer. He was a liability, a king who refused to govern, a spender who was bankrupting the kingdom. And soon, whispers began. Whispers that Ludwig wasn't just eccentric, He was mad. In 1886, after years of strange behaviour, a group of doctors declared Ludwig mentally unfit to rule. The diagnosis was made without even examining him. Overnight, he was deposed. But it gets stranger. On June 12, 1886, Ludwig was taken to the remote Berg Castle, under the watch of Dr. Bernhard von Gudden, one of the psychiatrists who'd signed off on his insanity. The next evening, Ludwig and Dr. Gudden went for a walk along Lake Starnberg. They never returned. Hours later, Ludwig's body was found in the shallow waters near the shore. He was fully clothed. No signs of drowning, no water in the lungs. Dr. Gudden's body was found nearby too, but his face was bruised, his fingernails broken, as if he had fought back against something, or someone. The official story was drowning, but almost immediately no one believed it. Ludwig was a strong swimmer. The lake was calm and shallow, and the bruises on Gudden, they didn't fit with the simple drowning. What did they talk about on that walk? Did Ludwig try to escape? Was it a murder-suicide, or was something more sinister at play? Some say Ludwig was assassinated, silenced before he could contest his removal. Others believe he snapped and attacked Gudden, then drowned in despair. But the strangest theory comes from a fisherman who, years later, claimed he saw Ludwig shot in the back while trying to swim away. No bullet was ever found, but autopsy photos were mysteriously suppressed, and his body was buried in secret. Even today, the Bavarian government refuses to allow an exhumation. But then, there's the oddest part of all, Ludwig's final words. The day before his death, when a servant begged him to remain calm, Ludwig reportedly whispered, "I must leave. The air here is poisoned." Was it metaphor? Madness? Or did Ludwig, the Dreamer King, know something no one else did? His death left a vacuum, but his legend only grew. Tourists flocked to his castles, writers romanticized his isolation, and to many he became a martyr, a man too imaginative, too sensitive for the political world, a king out of place and out of time, the fairy tale king, undone not by swords or battle but by whispers in the night, a man who built dream worlds so beautiful they frightened those who couldn't understand them. And while Bavaria moved on, the mists over Lake Starnberg never quite cleared. Across the sea, then vanished into the mist, leaving nothing but questions. But questions, it seems, are the true ghosts of history. They drift across time, continents and cultures, haunting even the places where no stories should exist, like deep in the jungles and diamond-rich soils of West Africa. Here, in Sierra Leone, an enigma rests not in the sea or sky, but in the earth itself. In the late 1990s, a strange artifact surfaced from the mining regions of Sierra Leone, a place long known for its diamonds, but suddenly yielding something altogether different. Miners uncovered a mysterious bluish stone, later dubbed the Skystone. Unlike anything they'd seen before, it wasn't just odd, it was unearthly. The stone was an intense sky blue colour, almost glowing when held under light. It shattered under stress, yet showed no crystalline structure, and most bizarrely, it wasn't composed of any common local minerals. Samples of the Skystone were eventually sent to labs across Europe for analysis. What they found only deepened the mystery. The stone was almost entirely made of oxygen, 77%, with the rest comprising small amounts of carbon, silicon, and traces of other elements. This composition doesn't occur naturally. Rocks aren't made of gas. Moreover, its structure didn't resemble any known material, either artificial or geological. No volcanic, sedimentary, or metamorphic process could explain it. Some researchers even suggested the stone had once been a liquid or gas artificially solidified. A feat not just beyond ancient humans, but beyond any modern industrial process. The most striking theory came from Italian researcher Angelo Pittoni, who claimed that local tribes in Sierra Leone had long referred to the stone as the Skystone, believing it to have fallen from the heavens in ancient times. Pittoni, a former geologist and UN consultant, proposed that the Skystone may have been a fragment of a crashed satellite or alien spacecraft. Not a modern one, but something from thousands of years ago. Skeptics were quick to pounce. They called Petoni's credentials into question. They pointed out the lack of chain of custody documentation, inconsistent lab results, and the overall sensationalism of the story. And it's true, there's a haze around much of the Skystone's provenance, making it difficult to separate scientific fact from urban legend. But despite that, no one has fully explained what the Skystone actually is. Adding to the mystery, locals claim that strange electromagnetic readings would spike near larger Skystone deposits. Some even said animals avoided the areas where the stone was found. And in some cases, the soil near Skystone samples was found to be sterile, as if something had scorched the life from it ages ago. If this were just a story of a weird rock, it might be dismissed. But the Skystone isn't alone. Around the world, there are other cases of impossible materials, like the Wedge of Aiud in Romania or the Baghdad Battery, objects that defy their supposed time period. The Skystone sits among them, quiet and cold in its mystery. And what does it mean if even one of these items is authentic? If the Skystone truly came from the sky, not as a meteorite but as something manufactured, then history isn't what we think it is. It would suggest an ancient contact, a forgotten epoch, or worse, one that was erased on purpose. This brings us back to the Palatine light, and to every mystery we've wandered through in this strange journey. From the lost Sublet mine to the Uzel Galley, the Somerton man, the San Pedro mummy, the Concho stone, and the Phaistos disc. Each mystery whispered a hidden truth, like fragments of an unread book. They pointed to knowledge buried too deep, to lives erased, to civilizations lost before they were even written down. The Skystone feels like the final page of that book, one made not of parchment, but of something harder, colder, bluer, something that doesn't belong. And perhaps that's the most enduring mystery of all, not what the stone is, but why it exists in silence. Who left it? Who forgot it? Or did someone want it forgotten? Maybe the Skystone isn't a relic of the past, but a reminder of what we're still missing. A challenge, perhaps, or a warning. Whatever it is, then it's waiting, just like the others.